I'm really happy to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you. I've had a career as an executive. So I had 20, 25 years of leadership. I was the VP of Global Customer Operations at LinkedIn. And I've had a spiritual practice or meditation or contemplation practice since I was a kid. I've been teaching since I was in college. And ultimately, I turned that into first a volunteer role, but then a full-time role at LinkedIn. I was the head of mindfulness and compassion programs for 3 years. And now I'm out on my own. I'm an author. I do speaking. I'm an entrepreneur, trying to change work from the inside out. This is my personal vision.
I am so curious about the title you had at LinkedIn. How did you come up with it? How did you advocate for yourself? Like
Oh,
mindfulness and compassion are two words that are heavily charged
yeah,
positively, but
yeah,
they don't always belong to the workplace.
it's
So I
true.
would love to hear how you got there.
When I'd been at LinkedIn a couple years, I was in this role of customer operations, leading customer service and customer facing things. And our CEO at the time, Jeff Weiner, was talking about mindfulness. He was talking about using headspace and the importance of, taking care of oneself. And then, over time, he was also talking about compassion, compassion in leadership. Um, and I thought, wow, maybe this is a place where I can bring my life passion to work. It seemed like a safe place to finally do that. And so I started just by leading one meditation class. And it took me 3 months to get up the courage to do it. And the first time there was one person there. And I'm sure that guy was just as terrified as I was. I never saw him again. But the next week there were three, and then there were five, and then it became a bigger and more regular thing. And then people knew I did it, so I would get invited to these bigger events. Like the CFO would have an offsite for 200 or 300 finance people and invite me to kick it off with an 8 or 10 minute meditation. Or the chief marketing officer would have an offsite with breakouts, and I would lead breakouts in, meditation. And I'd been doing that for 3 or 4 years. And then for the tipping point was our CEO he gave the commencement address at Wharton, very buttoned down,
Yeah.
serious Wharton, and talked about compassion, you know. And in a commencement address, you give your one big piece of advice. And his advice was if you're going to be successful in work, you got to be compassionate. Like, wait, what? And successful in life, be compassionate. The next day, he's on TV on like Good Morning America or one of those shows. And this is all they want to talk about is compassion and leadership. I'm watching all this thinking, okay, I've been in my operations role for 6 years. I'm ready to do something new. And it's time. It's time for me to do something new. It's time for LinkedIn to put our money where our mouth is
Yeah.
and commit to this. So I made a pitch to him, which was essentially, I didn't use these words. It was essentially, hey, you just told the 15,000 employees of LinkedIn that compassion was the most important thing that they could do. We're not really doing anything about it. So I'm an operations guy. So how about I'll will mainstream mindfulness and operationalize compassion. And that was hard to say no to. And so that was my job for 3 years was mainstreaming mindfulness and trying to operationalize compassion.
How does one do it? How do we operationalize compassion?
Yeah. So in the beginning, to be honest, I was mostly focused on mindfulness. I was mostly focused on building a program where people could come together. We ended up with something like 50 or 60 meditation sessions every week across the globe. We would do a speaker series. I would do, once a quarter on Friday or Saturday, we would have mini retreats and do 3 or 4 hours of different types of meditations or practices, really. And just I wanted to create a steady drip that mainstreamed mindfulness. So I would meditate on LinkedIn Live, and so here's this. Let's be real. So this senior white dude, mainstream VP meditating in front of everybody on LinkedIn. And so our job was to just make it normal, make it as normal as physical exercise.
Thank you so much for sharing. There's so much to unpack. First, I love that you said make it normal. Because I have my own experience when I was working at Stripe before the pandemic. there was this group of people who were meditating in the middle of the office. And I looked at them for, I don't know, 2 months, 3 months. And I was like, those guys are crazy. Like they're in a circle in the middle of the office. And there was two baggage. First, what are they doing? They're sitting in silence. And second is like, why do they have the time when I have no time? I'm like rushing between meetings and they take the time to like sit and do nothing. Like what? So there was two strong stereotypes, two biases.
Yeah.
And then one day, I guess I walked by and I had no meetings and they were about to sit down. So I was like, okay, guys, can I join? They were like, yeah, of course. I spent the first, I think they did it for like 30 minutes. I spent the first 30 minutes with my eyes closed, laughing. I was just laughing at the experience of knowing that other people were looking at me and us the way I was looking at them. Yeah. And so I was just cracking up, but it was enjoyable. And after that, I couldn't stop. Yeah. And I was like, and actually I kept laughing every time I was about to sit, because afterwards I realized how enjoyable it was, how pleasurable it was, and how beneficial it was after the 20 or 30 minutes for me to be a lot more aligned with what I have to do, what is on my plate, where I want to have an impact. Like I would have a clear head. Yeah. Whereas before I would spend the entire day, I guess starting 10 or 11 a.m., pretty foggy until 5 p.m.
It's funny the evolution we've gone on. If you think about physical exercise, I only realized recently that physical exercise for fun is relatively new, right? We only started this in the 70s and 80s. But now, 50 years later, everybody knows the benefits of physical exercise. And every company that has a bunch of people has a gym at work, or they're happy to give you a discount to go to a gym. Why? Because they know that it's good for employees' health. And if it's good for employees' health, ultimately it will be good for the company because they'll be, whatever.
Yeah.
But mindfulness is about mental health. And well, then I asked the question, okay, well, how many of our employees for their jobs need to run a 6-minute mile? How many employees for their jobs need to bench press, their weight or twice their weight, or be able to do Stairmaster for an hour, whatever? But how many employees for their jobs need to be mentally focused or need to be emotionally stable? Oh, all of them.
Like yeah.
Right. So we should be spending 100 times on mental health programs and mental wellness exercises as we are physical. I'm a fan of physical exercise as well, but come on, which one do we need more?
Is it what you talk about in your book, the full body yes? What was your goal with that book, or the message you wanted to pass across?
Well, in the moment that I was writing it, I was the head of mindfulness and compassion programs at LinkedIn. And a lot of people had the same question you did. Like, what is that? What does that mean? What does compassion even mean? And what does it mean in business? And the book is kind of an answer to that. And what I'm working on now, which I think is a much bigger opportunity, is how do we operationalize compassion? Compassion is how we do everything at work, because we don't work by ourselves. We don't live by ourselves. So how do we build products compassionately? How do we service? How do we sell products compassionately? How do we market them compassionately? And then internally, how do we treat each other? How do we treat our employees? How do we treat our customers? All of it.
I want to ask you about your new organization that you just launched, because you have that goal to change how we work.
Yeah.
Tell us more.
I really want to make things different for 3.5 billion people. Yeah. So I started this thing called the Collective, the Changing Work Collective. And it's designed as a community for anybody who wants to help change work from the inside out, who wants to make work a more compassionate and humane place.
How do we end this episode? Because there was so much goodness.